a quarter of the way through the NFL season. There's been heartbreak with injuries, jubilee with guys that we didn't expect. Sam Darnold being one of them, right? Plenty of surprises, plenty of disappointments. Tonight, we review how the first 4 weeks of the NFL season has gone for fantasy football, and then making a comeback, the one and only Dan Portillo returns from the darkness. It's going to be a great show. Let's go ahead and get this thing started.
I need to know everything, who and the what and the where, I need everything. Trust me, I hear what you're saying, but act like it's new what you're telling me. I'm curious, George, I hop in the Porsche, it's 5 and a horse, I'm ready for war, I'm coming for throats, to turn to a ghost, I need to know everything. Now you be surprised at the info you get is by letting them talk, so I'm letting them talk.
Welcome into another edition of Another Damn Fantasy Podcast. ADP, as always, is powered by Bite Size Sports. Today's episode, we're talking MVP for your fantasy football teams through the first 4 weeks, our biggest winners, our biggest losers. And as I mentioned in the cold open, Dan Portillo is going to be joining us towards the end of the show, as we're going to do a 2-round rest of season redraft. As always, I'm here with my co-host Josh Lemonsand. How we doing, man?
Doing great. Yeah, doing great. I got I'm kind of middling right now. I'm right around the 2-2, 3-1, 1-3 range right now in my league. So I have everything to play for. Just got to keep making the tough decisions, I guess, starting my lineup. But we're getting a little bit of everything. Still not sure if the tight end position will ever, come back to the world of the living. But until that happens, we're just gonna have to make do.
Yeah. It's been a weird season. Dallas Goedert, the tight end, won through the first 4 weeks. Everybody called that one right.
Right.
And both of our teams, man. Here we are, like, just doing a podcast together, and then our teams are 4-0.
That's right.
Like, nobody else can say that. Vikings and Chiefs.
I know. I don't even know what to say. I'm nervous to get excited about it. I'm obviously ecstatic, and we had a close game against the Packers, but it was not as close as it seemed at the end. It was pretty well in hand. So got the Jets in London on Sunday, so we'll see if we can go into the bye week perfect. But
yeah, the early game, what is it, 8:30 our time?
Yep.
The early game, a little coffee,
yep,
a little football.
Can't wait.
Yeah, we spent all day Sunday at a baseball tournament, so I didn't get a lot of football action. Been trying to catch up ever since. Got to watch a little bit of the Chiefs game in between two of our games, but even then it wasn't a whole lot of action we could see. So, but when you look at the box scores afterwards and you see 4-0, you're happy about that. Unfortunately, not happy about the Rashee Rice stuff. We'll get into that. But before we get into all that, let's get into our quick reaction from the previous week. Josh, I'll let you start here.
So I guess my reaction is that I'm still struggling to find trends. Like, how on your whatever platform you're on, like I play on Sleeper, I play on Flea Flicker. That one feels like a little bit more obscure than some of the other ones. Sometimes you get distracted by the ranking of your opponent, right? Like if your opponent for one of your players is not good against a quarterback or not good against a running back, it goes into the green. And I'm always tempted to just follow that because it looks really juicy, right? So, but I'm also finding myself struggling to be confident in those plays. For example, Justin Fields has Dallas right now, and that's a green matchup for him. And he's coming off a nearly 40-point game for me last week in one of my leagues. And so I just want to smash start him, and I think I probably will end up doing that. But I also feel like some of these teams, like the Cowboys, like, are they lurking before doing something again? Like, can we trust which teams are good or not good against the run? Last week I was anti Ken Walker against Detroit's rush defense, and Ken Walker had over 30 points. So
I faded Ken Walker hard Monday night.
Yes, I totally did too. I actually didn't even start him in a league, and I thankfully still won because I was watching him just accumulate points on the bench, and it was a huge bummer. Frankly, a chance to move up the overall points board for sure. So I guess my takeaway is that the second I start to feel like there's a trend, I still feel like 4 weeks is not enough for a trend for some things. Like there are some trends that are that for me are just set in stone already, like Malik Neighbors and his target share, right? Like something like that is going to be something that I can get behind right now. But there's still a lot of question marks. It's still early. So just I guess commiserating with anyone out there. If you're still struggling with your start sits for the weeks, I'm right there with you. There's a lot of up and downs, and teams that we think are real and then they're not real 1 week. So a lot of things are in flux right now. That's my takeaway. I didn't really give you anything concrete there, but that's where my head's at. It's a big jumbled mess. So
yeah, I think there's definitely some takeaways. There's some defenses that I think we can start to target. We know Washington, Arizona.
Right.
Arizona hosts San Francisco this week. We can definitely target
for sure.
And then there's some defenses that are really like the Broncos defense. I don't really want to be playing anybody against the Broncos defense right now. So there are some trends in that sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I agree. Between the injuries and the lack of passing in the NFL right now, we are struggling to kind of see like what's that target share going to look like for some of these wide receivers. Are some of these offenses going to funnel it to the pass or the run? You got a team like the Chiefs who are like super balanced right now, which is weird. It's not a normal thing for the Chiefs to be. So there are still definitely some big question marks. And you said at the top of the show, like tight ends, man, like there's nothing there right now for tight ends. So that's a little bit of a struggle. My quick reaction to last week is Jordan Love. I think Jordan Love ends up as a top 5 fantasy quarterback. So long as he is healthy. Holy smokes. I don't care if they're down 20. Was it 28-0 at one point? Again, I wasn't watching. So they're down 28-0. I don't care. Jordan Love, with the amount of receivers this guy has, now Tucker Kraft is getting into the mix a little bit. Yeah, that you lose Christian Watson, but you got Dontavian Wicks to just come right in and take over. I think Jordan Love ends up as a top 5 quarterback this year. And that's right. We try not to overreact every week when we do these quick reactions, but that's my reaction to this week's like, wow.
Yeah.
Phenomenal first game and phenomenal game this past week. So the 2 games he's played, he has been great. Yeah. Although the 2 games he's played, they've lost, which is just actually more like quirky than anything.
Yeah.
But also true. So,
well, as an NFL quarterback, he's still really inconsistent. He threw for almost 400 yards, but he had 3 picks and 4 touchdowns. Like he's like, if I were a Packers fan, I'd be watching him going, man, it's going to be Brett Favre all over again. When he's on, he's going to be throwing for everything. And then but he's also going to put them in rough positions and turn the ball over. But yeah, Christian Watson's injury doesn't really bother me for him as a fantasy quarterback because he's always been battling injury, right? You saw Jaden Reed with an extra pep in his step against the Vikings, getting some targets. Dontavian Wicks looks exciting. You mentioned Tucker Kraft, the tight end. Like he's got all the weapons in the world, and he's just going to be throwing it all over the place. So I know I faded him at his value preseason at where he was being drafted, but with a lot of quarterbacks kind of on the downward, kind of in a downturn with production, I think it could easily end up being a top 5 fantasy quarterback. So
yeah, he's looking really good, and we're gonna do a 2-round rest of season redraft here a little later on, and I think that Jaden Reed, one of his pass catchers, has a chance. Doesn't mean he will be drafted in that draft, but I think he has a chance to be talked about in the top 30, top 24 type of fantasy relevant players the rest of the season. Real quick, the next 5 games for this Green Bay team: LA Rams, Arizona Cardinals, Houston Texans, Jacksonville Jaguars, Detroit Lions. A bunch of defenses that you can throw all over. I just think Jordan Love is a guy that I'd be very happy to have as my starting QB for fantasy football currently as it stands. If you're with us here tonight, thank you so much. We definitely appreciate it. We're going to have a lot of fun tonight. We're about to get into our fantasy MVPs through the first 4 weeks. But if you will, hit that like button, subscribe to the Bite Size Sports YouTube channel. We're 14, I think it was 14 last time I looked, 14 subscribers short of 700. So help us out. Hit that subscribe button if you will. And then jump in the chat. Lee's already in here early and often, as always. We definitely appreciate that. He's got some starts to the questions. We want to get to these. We'll get to them throughout the entire show. So jump in there. And then as we're talking our MVP, we'd love to hear from you for your MVP. But I guess before we do get into that, let's talk a little bit about the news. And Lee, then we'll get to your question here after we talk through some news. Josh, everybody knows it by now, the Rashee Rice stuff. Mm-hmm. The reason I want to bring this up is because I'm conflicted. As a Chiefs fan, I'm holding out like this slither of hope, like maybe it's not so bad. But honestly, it's weird that we're not going to have more information until next week. And so from a fantasy manager position, what I would be doing is I am just going to hold Rashee Rice. Mm-hmm. When it first happened, when I first saw feared ACL, initial reaction is like, he's done. Obviously, you just drop him, move on.
Right.
Now I kind of just want to hold and kind of see until I get that confirmation. How are you handling it if you have Rashee Rice on your team right now? Are you just like, no, it's done and over with? Don't waste a bench spot. I got guys out there on the waivers I can get, like Dontavian Wicks right now. Or are you still going to hold as well?
I'm holding for now. The only kind of situation in which I'm not holding is if I'm 0-4 and he was a key contributor and I'm desperate for a win and I have, if I have a shallow bench and I need all hands on deck and I need a win to keep this season alive, the nature of what it sounds like for his injury, I'm going to err on the side of, I think it's okay to drop him in that scenario. Otherwise, yes, like you, I'm holding. This is an advertisement for an IR spot, assuming he'll go on an IR at some point.
Gotta have the IR spot.
It would be nice if they just put him on there now because it's a knee injury. I can't imagine he's going to avoid the IR, but definitely in that sort of situation, I would hold if I have a deep enough bench for sure. Just a little bit longer, unless you're desperate. If you're desperate, you got to do what you got to do. Because you got Dontavian Wicks, you have some other receivers like Xavier Legette is kind of coming on. You have Josh Downs might be making some splashes. You have some guys that are worth putting on your bench that might be mid-season to late season contributors. And so, if you desperately need a win, you might have to part ways with him. But for his upside, what he was accomplishing and his target per share percentage, I mean, you have to stick with him as long as you can. You have to give him a chance to. Even if he misses IR plus another week, so like 5-6 weeks, he could still contribute, in the playoff stretch. And so
right in the heart of your playoffs. Absolutely.
Right. And that's when the Chiefs are going to be turning it on, even though they'll already have clinched something, they're still going to need to get him back up to speed. Like if he comes back at all in the fantasy season, you're going to want him. So it's a hard decision, but I would hold if I could.
A couple of Colts hitting the injury news this week. Anthony Richardson, I want to bring him up. He's got the hip injury. If he doesn't play, you already just mentioned Josh Downs. Mm-hmm. If Richardson doesn't play, I think Josh Downs is an interesting flex play this week. And then Jonathan Taylor with a high ankle sprain. If he doesn't play, I'm starting. I think Trey Sermon is a starter.
Yep.
Especially if you're in a pinch against the Jacksonville Jaguar defense that you're not really worried about. Anything on both of those guys.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you on Trey Sermon. I'm comfortable, especially if Anthony Richardson's out. I'm comfortable starting a Colts starting running back, even if it's not the explosiveness of Jonathan Taylor. Like you're still running behind a pretty solid offensive line.
Yeah.
And against the Jaguars team that just gave up at least 430.
So you start everybody against the Jags.
Right. The Jags are in free fall, so unless they have a random turnaround, like you could expect some points in this game.
How does Doug Peterson still have a job? I know we're a fantasy show, but 4 weeks in, they have not shown a lick of anything. Like nothing has looked good.
Yeah, they're running out of excuses, and I'm still a Trevor Lawrence guy. I've made a whole bunch of excuses for why the Jags are underachieving, but They started last year 8-3, and I think they've only won like one
Man,
a couple games since then. Like it's in dire
who's
straits.
been worse in the last 10 games, the Jags or the Eagles, right? Like they've both been really bad.
Right.
Lee says, can't you put him on the IR? So if your fantasy league has an IR spot, yeah, you just put Rashee Rice on the IR until
Yep,
you
for sure.
know for sure what's going on. There are plenty of leagues out there still, unfortunately, that do not utilize an IR spot as a part of the roster builds.
And some leagues too, like if a player is marked out but not officially on IR, you can't use your IR spot, and so that's another kind of unfortunate wrinkle. If they don't officially put him on IR, but assuming he's for sure out at least next week, that is still going to eat up a bench spot if your league has some specific terminology there. So that's another thing you have to check out too, unfortunately.
Christian Watson, we talked about the Green Bay Packers and Jordan Love a little bit. Probably going to be out 2 to 4 weeks. Go look on your waiver wire right now. Dontavian Wicks is the guy to get. I went and checked all my leagues today or yesterday, I guess, before the waiver wires, whenever it was. So go check out if Wicks is still lingering out there, throw him on the end of your bench.
Yep.
Joe Mixon, Tank Dell, both expected to be back this week, as well as Trey McBride and David Njoku. So those are 4 guys that we've kind of been waiting on. We missed Tank Dell last week, Trey McBride last week. Mixon and Njoku have been a couple weeks now. So just some guys that hopefully we'll see back out there. And then I want to just mention, because I saw the headline about TJ Hawkinson is ahead of schedule. I didn't really expect him until Thanksgiving, but starting now, it looks like he might be ready next, 2, 3, 4 weeks potentially.
Yeah, and if he's back, I mean, he's got the track record, especially with this year with how down tight ends are. Like if you got
how great Sam Darnold's playing.
Yeah, if you have a deep bench, or if you can coast for a couple weeks, and if you can get Hawkinson before there's a bad rush for him in your redraft leagues, absolutely.
100%
something to think about or monitor very closely. So
Lee said that John said he should have been fired on Monday, so that's a good plug for John and Ben and Necessary Roughness every Tuesday night here on the Bite Size YouTube network. If you missed last night's show, go take a listen. Those 2 guys are just very sharp. They talk NFL stuff as we talk more fantasy relevant stuff. They really get into the X's and O's and the nuts and bolts of the NFL. And I cannot disagree with John's take that, Doug Peterson should have been fired on Monday. So I do think he'll be the first NFL coach fired this year. All right, let's get to this start sit question. If you have any start sit questions for week 5, throw them in the chat and we will answer them as we go. Josh Lee says he has 2 of these. Amari Cooper or Rashid Shaheed is the first one. And then Kyle Pitts versus Zach Ertz. Come on, man. Like this, it's a question. It's a real question.
Yes.
It just sucks that it's still a question, right?
Yep.
Like, why is Kyle Pitts not completely just smashed this? But he hasn't. So who are you taking in both these situations?
Yeah, I like Cooper against the Commanders' pass defense this week. Shaheed's going up against the Chiefs. And so I think that's matchup wise, if you're really looking for boom or bust, Shaheed, always a candidate for a huge deep ball, but the Browns offense is so terrible, so it's hard for me to predict or hard for me to pick Cooper, but Cooper is a proven guy, and the Commanders secondary has been giving up all sorts of yardage. So I think I'm leaning Cooper over Shaheed, and then I'm still going to go Pitts over Ertz, even though it's tough. You have the Falcons are a Thursday night game tomorrow against the Bucks, whose defense looking pretty good, but Ertz has the 49ers. The Ertz is against the Browns. I was confusing.
Yeah, Ertz has moved on from Arizona.
Oh my God, all sorts of blanking on it. But either way, the Browns are another good defense. So I'm still leaning Pitts there, even though it's a Thursday night game. I don't feel good about either of those too much, to be honest. But I'm going to go Cooper and Pitts here.
I will also go Cooper and Pitts. Cooper going up. This Washington defense is not good. Don't look at the Arizona box score and see that they scored 14 points and think Washington has fixed things. Right. They have not. They're a really bad defense. Like it could be historically bad. Amari Cooper's really, really good. And he's pretty much all this offense has. So give me Amari Cooper. And then you're just taking upside with Kyle Pitts.
Right.
Not that he has a floor at all. The floor is like 0 right now, but you got to take the upside and hope that you can get some Kyle Pitts, a touchdown maybe, or at the very least get like 5 for 50 and just call it a day, right? So,
Right.
All right. As we move into our quarterly awards, we're going to bring in our guest of honor, the one, the only, Dan Portillo. Dan, welcome in, my man. It's been forever, dude. How's it going?
I know,
man?
It's been too long.
How's it going,
Appreciate
Dan?
me, welcome me back on the show here. It's been quite some time since I was able to grace the presence of ADP. But I mean, I love it. Love watching you guys do what you do. So, thank you.
Yeah,
I'm
the
excited.
OG, man.
I haven't been able to talk fantasy in a minute. You know what I mean? Like, at least not on a forum like this. We pretty much keeping it Chiefs where I'm at with the fastest 40. So it's gonna be a nice change of pace. Kick the dust off for the fantasy talk.
Nice.
Love it. Well, you and I just worked out this way, but you and I got a big matchup in the ADP league this week.
Oh, perfect.
Your brother took me down last week, so hopefully I can take you down this week. I'm 3-1 in that league right now, so I'm not trying to take 2 losses in a row.
You're catching me on a good week. I'm not gonna have Saquon this week.
That's always a good week. That is always
that's a pretty big loss for the squad.
Well, we're gonna go. We're gonna do a quick quarterly award. So, Dan, if you have somebody, great. If not, so be it. But I figured you're pretty good on the fly as well. So we'll start with just our biggest wins of the first quarter. So every week we come in and kind of talk about our biggest wins of the week. We're just going to talk about kind of our biggest win for the first quarter. These are guys that maybe we drafted or guys we talk a lot about or guys that we just loved coming into the season. And I'll just kind of get us started here with anywhere that I could not draft Kyler Murray, because everybody knows I'm very high on Kyler Murray this year. Got the videos out there, everything. Every time we talked, I talked about Kyler Murray. But anytime I did not get Kyler Murray, so anytime I drafted against people who are listening and sniped him from me, I always took Jaden Daniels. And that is obviously working out very well for me in redraft this year. I was ready to come on here and victory lap some of my starting 4, James Cook, Kyler Murray, Rashee Rice. All of them have had, 3 good weeks, and then they all kind of fell flat. Obviously, Rice with the injury, but Kyler Murray and James Cook both fell flat on their face in week 4. So I couldn't talk them up. So I had to go with my backup guy and Jaden Daniels, who has just been phenomenal, right? It's been a heck of a time watching him play football. He runs like crazy. And he's winning ball games for the Washington Commanders too. So kudos to him. Maybe the actual thing is to get the second pick in the draft and not the first pick. Maybe the NFL teams will start picking up on that.
That person picking first, they take that off of you, and you just kind of like, okay, whatever one falls to me,
That's right. And it's the better one.
Yep. It takes the power of the decision out of your hands, or it's like, this is the card I was dealt.
That's right. We'll make it happen. Let us know. Lee's already letting us know he's got Jennings on 2 of his teams. Big win for him. Let us know who your biggest win is in the chat. Josh, turn it over to you. Who's your biggest win so far?
Yeah, so this is more of an obscure reference. I have him in our ADP league, and I have him in another league that this was kind of like a roster filler that I was just like, well, I'll give him a chance. It's Chuba Hubbard, who, I had very little hope for him. One of the leagues I had him as a keeper league. I got him as like an extra in a trade in the offseason, and I was like, I'm not even sure I'm going to have him on the roster come the beginning of the season, but yet he's been one of my more consistent, easier starts every week. He's got at least, he's had at least 10 carries and 4 catches in his last 3 games. I know when Jonathan Brooks comes back, that could eat into it. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend Carolina's any good or their offense is any good, but from a production standpoint for fantasy, which is all we care about, Hubbard's been pretty consistent at the running back spot. So I'm going to give the nod to him. I've had some guys that have had some moments, but from a consistency basis, aside from week 1 for Carolina, I mean, he's been he's been pretty solid, and he's going to be my first win or my best win for now. And again, if Jonathan Brooks comes back, he may fall off the face of the earth. So I'm going to give him a nod now while he's on the top of the chain here.
While he has a chance.
I think it's a good time to just mention Brooks's name. I found him on a waiver wire this week in one of my leagues. Somebody had dropped him, so I went ahead and put in a waiver claim for him. I think it goes through tomorrow.
Yeah.
This is the time of year people are starting to drop guys like Jonathan Brooks, right? Because they can't play them. Maybe they're 0-4, 1-3. They're feeling desperate. Just take a peek. You never know who you'll find out there sometimes.
Well, injuries have been freaking tough this year, man. So like you only have a finite number of roster spots that you can even hold these guys on your team. I mean, I'm looking at one of my teams in a dynasty league that has Rashee Rice, Cooper Kupp. I'm sitting on gosh, I had Hollywood Brown obviously before, and so it's just you could put yourself in a position where you just have this laundry list. Jonathan Taylor comes up lame this past weekend. I mean, people are in a tough place right now where they have to pivot from the plan of stashing Jonathan Brooks. If I had him and I had to pivot, I'd be trading him though.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. Maybe you find the Chuba manager and send him to the Chuba manager. 100%. Let the Chuba manager deal with the 50-50 timeshare that will probably be coming in a couple weeks.
You sort that out. That's
right.
Dan, do you have a big winner so far through the first quarter of the year?
Yeah, man, and it's tough because the guy I'm about to pick, he's already been one of those guys that's dealt with an injury, but it's Kenneth Walker for the Seattle Seahawks. I was really big on him. I actually drafted him. I'm in 4 redraft leagues this year, and I took him on 3 of the 4 teams that I had a chance to. Really wanted him in the ADP league. I didn't get a chance to snag him there, but I mean, his volume is just insane. What he's been able to do with his carries is even crazier. I don't know if you guys watched that Monday Night Football game, but what he did acrobatically to get out of
that was weird
and flip forward.
Like how does it even happen?
It looked like Spider-Man fighting a villain or something, like just the way he was kicking that guy's tail. But insane what he's been able to do with his touches and his volume. And technically he's in a backfield share with Zach Charbonnet, which Charbonnet filled in nicely for him in his absence. And I did pick up a couple shares of him as well. But Kenneth Walker, definitely one of the guys I want to shout out. And an honorable mention, just to keep it on the running back topic, to Aaron Jones, a guy who I did not have faith in whatsoever. I felt like I was cornered in the one team I drafted him in, and I am so thankful that I did. So shout out to Aaron Jones for that too. Top 10 fantasy back right now.
Yeah, even as a Vikings fan, I was excited to bring Aaron Jones in, but with his injury history, I was thinking it was going to be way more of a split with him and Ty Chandler. I didn't touch him in fantasy very much at all, and he's been a powerhouse.
Ty Chandler can't seem to be on the field too often. No. Lee has Kenneth Walker and Nico Collins on the ADP league as he sits 2-2.
Lee, you stole my dream.
Yeah, he's going to linger here in the ADP league and give himself a chance to be in the playoffs. All right, let's go the opposite side of things, right? What's our biggest loss of the first quarter? Let us know in the chat as well who maybe somebody you drafted everywhere or somebody you're really high on, but they just haven't done very well. And Josh, I'll let you get started here. Who's your biggest loss?
Yeah, so this one hurts the most because we talked about it a lot on this podcast. Sam Laporta is my biggest loss this year, or this so far for 4 games. I've been high on Trey McBride. I was talking up Trey McBride, but then I saw the value in this draft for Sam Laporta, and I jumped on it. And I drafted him, I believe, in the 3rd round. And so he's sitting here at tight end 15. He hasn't broken 10 fantasy points per game. That's PPR. He hasn't had more than 5 targets in a game. And I know the Lions are supposed to have a really high powered offense. They kind of unlocked it a little bit against Seattle, but they still not to the benefit of Sam Laporta. And so I think, I'm not saying he's done. I'm not saying, especially with the tight end position, you're still starting him every week, but that was a really big missed opportunity for me. taking him as high as I did. And so I've had a lot of guys that from a week to week basis have kind of failed me at times, but from a consistency standpoint, the first 4 weeks, I don't think Laporta managers are happy, and I definitely was excited to have him. I was one of the few leagues that I had a shot at him, and I was like, all right, I get Laporta, and he's completely failed me so far. So it's a big bummer.
Well, yeah, you had to draft him in the third round?
Third round draft
I mean,
capital on that.
You're spending big time.
That's tough.
On him.
Yep.
And it's really tough because he's been healthy, right?
Right.
And so you don't even have that to lean on. Like, well, yeah, he got hurt or he hasn't played at all, or
Right.
it's just a wasted pick. Like, he's been healthy, he's been out there, he's been running the routes, just hasn't really gotten involved much yet. Dan, who do you have for a big loser?
This is tough, man. This is really tough. When you said Sam Laporta, I wanted to go tight end as well. I don't know, Trevor, what you're going to say, and if you don't say this guy, I can come back to him. I think everyone knows where I would go.
Go ahead.
It's Mark Andrews is who I'm thinking, right?
Go ahead.
What, 0 catches the last 2 weeks? I mean, it's just been dismal. You're spending similar draft capital on a guy like that, probably early 4th, late 3rd, depending on the size of your league. But honestly, I want to shift this a little bit because I think, it's hard not to go for the guys that are injured in this scenario. Like, obviously, if you took Christian McCaffrey, you're big time losing right now. But whenever your player is affected by another player's injury, I think that makes it even more difficult. And that's why I think the biggest loser in this scenario is Tyreek Hill. That's a guy who you had big time hope for coming out. You're sitting at pick 2. You're debating whether you're going to go CD or Tyreek or maybe Breece Hall if you're feeling frisky for a running back. Yep. And all of a sudden you draft a guy who's coming off a back-to-back 1,700 plus yard receiving seasons, and the guy is fighting to even get a target.
Comes out week 1
now.
Comes out week 1 and just looks everything you wanted him to look like.
Popped off. And unfortunately, Tua Tagovailoa dives face first instead of, baseball technique. And now here we are 3 weeks later. We don't know what the future of quarterback position is for the Miami Dolphins long term, and more importantly, the health of Tua. But Tyreek Hill, if you're putting your very first pick of the draft, and I mean the 2nd, 3rd, 4th overall pick has so much value to it, and it's got maybe 5 points a week to show for it now.
Yep.
Yeah, it's really, really tough. I think what makes it tougher is like I put him as a sit of the week last week. Him and Waddle. I just said you got to sit these guys. You can't keep playing them.
Yeah.
But like, how do you do that? How do you sit Tyreek Hill?
Oh man.
Because and Huntley threw.
I'm 1-3 in the league.
Huntley threw 2 or 3 bombs to him.
Right.
They just couldn't connect. Right. But if he connects on one of those, then you're like, of course it's Tyreek. He's back.
Yeah.
That
gets better as they progress because Huntley just kind of got thrust into that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You got to get your timing.
I think Huntley will be okay.
Guys.
Huntley's better than Skylar Thompson is.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. Thompson.
I'm not really sure why Skylar Thompson was still the backup, to be honest.
No. He had no business.
He played a little last year and showed him how bad he was.
Yeah.
I
think that's the conundrum though, for sure, because it would be a lot. It'd be easier to swallow if you're like, okay, I just can't start him at all. I'm going to move on. And you don't have to worry about it. But yeah, he is still Tyreek Hill. It just takes one of those, we saw Jameson Williams he got 16, 17 points on one play on Monday night against Seattle with his long touchdown. And so Tyreek's capable of that anytime he sets on the field, and they have a lot of weapons in Miami. And so any Achane owners, any Tyreek Hill owners, like, you're just going to be sitting there probably putting him out there and wasting a spot. But then there's going to be 1 week if you bench him, he'll go for 30. So,
and it's going to
at least the 101 drafters know they can't put
exactly. Yeah,
right. That decision's made for you. You're juggling a premier guy. There's the emotional attachment that happens whether you like it or not when you take a guy that high in a draft. So
you're not sweating. Well, my biggest loss, obviously, Dan and I, as Chiefs fans and fantasy players and all of the above, is just Rashee Rice's injury. I was so high on him. I kept I mean, every single week we would talk on the podcast and I would say, you're not drafting him high enough. You're not drafting him high enough.
Right.
I drafted him at the back end of the 3rd round on multiple drafts, like took him everywhere. Second highest. I think, no, him and Jameson Williams are both tied for my highest shares in best ball for wide receivers. Like took him everywhere, took him anytime I wanted to, as early as I wanted to. And that's just really tough. And it just obviously just hit. It's very fresh. But if I'm like thinking about non-injury stuff here, just the 0 RB, I talked about it last week. It's just my biggest loss. All I do is 0 RB drafts. And ADP is the only draft I took a running back early in Jahmyr Gibbs because I was worried about the Puka stuff at the time. And I'm 3-1 in that league and looking great, but everywhere else I didn't really do 0 RB. I really went 0 RB everywhere. And you look at the top 10 running backs at this point, it's all the big guys, it's all the veterans, it's the Derrick Henrys and Saquons and all these guys that you drafted in the first 4 rounds. And I was just like, no way I'm touching these guys. And they're all on new teams. None of them even, they're all moved on. They're all old. And they're all just doing their thing. And it's just kind of kicking me while I'm down, unfortunately, here because I don't have any of these guys anywhere. Yep. So we'll definitely talk a little bit more about some of those running backs, I think, in our redraft here coming up. 2 more here. First off, bust of the year. So this doesn't have to be about us anymore. Just overall fantasy bust of the year, where they were drafted, what they've done so far, anything. Just who do you think's a fantasy bust? And I will start this one. And I'm going to go with Garrett Wilson. Because Garrett Wilson was drafted the back end of round 1. Yep. Garrett Wilson was drafted 110, 109 sometimes. He's a guy that we expected Aaron Rodgers is going to be healthy. We're finally going to start to see it out of Garrett Wilson. He's this phenomenal target earner, runs great routes. But the guy hasn't even touched 15 PPR points yet this season. 15. That's all we're at. We can't even get 15 out of him. He currently sits as a wide receiver 38 at 10.9 PPR points per game. Just, it's one thing to like have maybe 3 bad games and one you pop off and have a ceiling game. He hasn't shown a ceiling at all yet. And that kind of bothers me. And I'm a little bit worried here. Interested to see where he gets drafted here in a minute because Garrett Wilson, rest of the season, I'm not really sure what to expect of this guy, especially if we're gonna look at the first four games. So Garrett Wilson is my bust of the year. If you have a bust of the year, let us know in the chat. Do you guys have anything to say about Garrett Wilson? Do you agree, disagree? And then we'll go from there. But yeah, Garrett Wilson's my guy.
I mean, I totally agree with that stance. I'm in a keeper league, and I was between Devon Achane and Garrett Wilson. Luckily for me, I kept Achane. And, I mean, good Lord, Garrett Wilson, if you're spending a first-round pick on him in the back half, and I don't know about you guys, talking on the show, the turn this year from 10 through 12 in your redraft leagues was atrocious. You know what I mean? It was one of those situations where if you were picks 9 through 12, you're getting the same value at the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th spot as you would at 24, 25 overall. Like that whole tier.
There was a pretty clear drop off.
Absolutely. Right. And so if you're running the risk on a player like Garrett Wilson, and this is the return you get, I mean, you're in a bad way. I can't look at any team in my league that took Garrett Wilson and they're 3-1 or better. You know what I mean? Like they're maybe 500. So I totally agree. That's one that I'm like so glad I dodged a bullet there. I was rather taking Saquon Barkley in those scenarios than
right now I definitely wish I would have. We have a Kansas City in-person draft with some buddies of mine.
Oh yeah.
And I think I was picking 6th, and Garrett Wilson fell all the way back to me in the 2nd round. It's only 10-person, but still that was far past where he usually is picked. And I can't believe I got Garrett Wilson in the 2nd round. What are you idiots doing? And I'm like, who's wearing the cake on the face now? Like he's just not great, right? Doesn't feel good. So that's a tough one so far.
Yeah, I agree with what you guys said on Garrett Wilson. I mean, with Rodgers coming back, you just figured it was going to be great. And yeah, I can totally hear you. What you said, he was what, 30 wide receiver 38 overall right now?
Wide receiver 38 is what I had for
Ugly.
PPR. That's rough.
That is rough.
Josh, who do you got?
Well, so I've come around a little bit on my flag plant Chris Olave because I was really worried about him early on in the season. He had a rough start.
Same.
He's kind of turned it around and made it a little bit better. I still think he was early for me as my wide receiver 1 in the second round, but I'm actually going to go with my bust here as quarterback Jalen Hurts. And, you know, when you look at the overall numbers, it's not terrible, but he's only made it over 20 fantasy points one time. He's been over 16 twice and over 10 just the other time when he was against New Orleans. And I just think that where I drafted him, I think I have him in the ADP league. For that value, you're going for one of the top quarterbacks to get that Josh Allen type advantage, to get that rushing quarterback type advantage. And I don't think I've seen that from him yet this year. So I'm calling him a bust. I don't think it's the end of season for him. I think he can still contribute. I'm obviously going to still start him, but because there are some actual signs that he's playing better as an overall quarterback. There's numbers, people are posting numbers of him against the blitz that's improved in against recent years. And so not all is lost, but when I drafted him to be one of the game changer, difference maker type of fantasy quarterbacks, he hasn't come anywhere close to that. And so, you know, I think he's definitely in bust territory for these first 4 weeks for sure.
Dan, bust of the year so far?
That's been a tough one to watch, Jalen Hurts, and that's the tough part about being a player too, is like you could have all these quality metrics on the field, but that's not going to translate to fantasy points, unfortunately. Like you don't get points off of QBR and stuff like that. So, you know, that is one of those situations where it's like the Eagles just as a whole have been tough, and I'll give Jalen Hurts a little bit of grace here for this. And it's because of the injuries. Not having A.J. Brown, your top target for 3 out of your 4 games up to this point. Like there's a long track record of Eagles success with A.J. Brown, and not having him on the field, it's the complete opposite for them.
Right.
Not just for Jalen Hurts, but for the team as a whole. So not having him, I'll give him some grace there for that. But definitely disappointing being a guy that has Jalen Hurts in a dynasty league right now.
Yeah, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Anthony Richardson, all 3 of those guys have kind of been tough as highly drafted top 6 type of quarterbacks this year, and it's kind of a interesting season. The passing yards are down right now. It's highly talked about.
Touchdowns are
but
down.
Even like the one thing with Jalen Hurts is you would expect some of that rushing, and Barkley is really kind of just taken over there. And it'll be interesting to see if Barkley is going to be the 101 here in a moment or so, but that's where we would be at there. Dan, any last thing about bust of the year? Do you have a guy yourself?
Yeah, I mean, right now for me, it's Patrick Mahomes, as much as that hurts to say, being a Chiefs fan myself.
Hey, as a Chiefs fan, you're 4-0, baby. You're
4-0,
winning games. Like, it don't matter, right? But for fantasy, dang.
It's been tough. I mean, if you were asking me, you know, put 4 quarterbacks on a Mount Rushmore for fantasy football, it'd be Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, and Jalen Hurts. So, I mean, we're talking about 2 of those guys in the bust category for a reason. It's because the expectations are so high.
Right.
Because they're game-changing guys. I mean, they have the potential to put up a 25 to 30 burger any given week, and we just haven't seen that, especially from Patrick Mahomes. The picks are killing him. The picks are killing him. He's thrown 5 of them so far in just 4 games. You couple that with kind of a down year from a rushing standpoint so far. You're used to getting maybe 30, 40 yards out of him. Maybe he scrambles for a touchdown here and there. But we just haven't seen those big chunk plays get ripped off from him yet anyway. And then he's losing all his weapons left and right. I mean, that's the guy that if I have him as my quarterback in fantasy, I'm maybe trying to flip him for someone else and hope I can just sell the name.
Get the name value out there still a little bit.
Yeah.
If he has one good game, right? Like the offense looks a little different this week.
Yeah.
Maybe you do it just because you know that's not necessarily how they want to win right now. They don't want him to go off and throw for 5 touchdowns and 300 plus yards. And it's just not the way they want to win ball games right now. And it's working for them. So he doesn't have to do those things.
Right.
All right, let's talk a little bit more fun stuff. The MVP through 4 weeks, the fantasy MVP through the first 4 weeks. Let us hear in the chat who your fantasy MVP is through 4 weeks. Josh, I'll let you start this one, and then I'll go to you, Dan. So, Josh, who is your fantasy MVP?
I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to answer your question with a committee backfield because I'm fortunate to have both of them. I have the amazing Seattle backfield right now, and so I've benefited from Ken Walker in week 1. Could have been Ken Walker in week 4. We don't have to get into that right now. And I know Danny already mentioned Ken Walker early on, but when Charbonnet filled in, he also did really well. And Charbonnet's actually been over 10 PPR points all 4 weeks, even as the second fiddle in the 2 weeks that Ken Walker's been playing. But the nice thing is they just went up against one of the previous best rush defenses for fantasy with the Detroit Lions on Monday night, and Ken Walker killed it. And so this backfield, when they're both healthy, it's Ken Walker's, and he's getting that workload that you mentioned earlier. He's getting all the touches. He's producing at a high level. And then I just have to give the nod to Charbonnet as well, because Walker's only done it twice because he's been hurt, obviously. But those two guys have been stellar for me this year in one of my leagues. And they're going home as my MVPs tonight of the quarter after that 33-point performance from Ken Walker on Monday. So
love that. I love doing. I don't do that as much in redraft. I love doing it in Dynasty.
Yeah,
where you get both the running backs from the same place, right? I've got a Rico Dowdle Zeke team. The same team has Tajay Spears and Tony Pollard on it. I really love doing that for Dynasty leagues where you get both the running backs.
Right.
I don't handcuff as much. They would have been tough to get both of them in a redraft this year just because Charbonnet was drafted a little bit higher than what your stereotypical handcuff running back would have been. But, man, if you've got them both like you have, that is the perfect scenario, especially over the first 4 weeks where you could literally have started both of them 2 weeks at a time, and they both give you top 10 performances over and over again. So that's pretty nice there. Dan, do you have a fantasy MVP on the season so far?
Yeah, man, I want to give it to Justin Jefferson, and it's because I think expectations on him were down from the type of player he is, and really he just stepped up and proved that he is one of those all-time wide receivers that is truly QB proof. Sam Darnold having a great year, obviously, so can't knock him too hard on this. But when you're throwing the ball to Justin Jefferson multiple times a game, it definitely makes your life easier. Justin Jefferson reminded me a lot of like DeAndre Hopkins in his dominance that he had early on in his career. But to come in and put up the numbers that maybe you were expecting from CD and Tyreek and not quite expecting from him, he's still a first-round pick. But I think he's one of the few first-round picks that have actually stepped up to being a first-round pick. And so I really want to highlight Justin Jefferson for that and give him the MVP, as hard as it is not to give it to maybe a couple other guys who I think, I don't know, I'm a little bit of a softie for J.K. Dobbins, and so I would love to talk about him here too. But I think Justin Jefferson deserves it for sure, fantasy MVP from my end.
Yeah, I will second that notion for Jefferson, because as the resident Vikings fan, I got a lot of questions like, is Jefferson going to be okay in the first round with Darnold throwing him the ball? Like, is the downgraded quarterback going to hurt him? And he's just proven why we paid him all that money this offseason. So yeah, definitely a worthy shout out for Jets. So.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the top 12 per ADP on Fantasy Pros. McCaffrey, Lamb, Hill, Robinson, Hall, St. Brown, Chase, Jefferson, Barkley, A.J. Brown, Jonathan Taylor, Garrett Wilson. only two of those guys are in the top 5 of their position, and Saquon Barkley and Justin Jefferson.
Yep.
And that if that's your top, if that was the first 12 guys off of the board, you're only 2 teams feel good about their first round pick right now.
Right.
St. Brown and Chase have been fine, but they haven't been, they haven't had 4 good games, where Jefferson and Barkley have had 4 good games.
Right.
So
the consistency is there every
I like
week.
that. Justin Jefferson is literally always wide open. I'm going wide receiver 1 on the year, Malik Neighbors, rookie wide receiver for the New York Giants, drafted as wide receiver 24. There was a lot of talk early in the preseason about how maybe he's better than Marvin Harrison Jr. and maybe he can outperform him, but Harrison Jr. was on the Cardinals and Neighbors just has Daniel Jones and the Giants and all this back and forth. I think it kind of squeezed us out from wanting to draft him at his upside. And man, he's just taken the league by storm here. Wide receiver 1, just been absolutely blazing all over the field and just getting peppered with targets over and over and over again from Daniel Jones. So I like what I've seen out of Malik Neighbors so far. And I think if you took him, you probably took him as your 3rd, maybe 4th wide receiver at that point in time.
Yep.
And you feel really, really good about that. So I like that. Lee says Commanders quarterback Jaden Daniels is running away with the MVP. Jaden Daniels, a phenomenal draft pick here in fantasy football right now. Probably drafted as the 9th or 10th, 11th quarterback off the board, depending on when you drafted. And he is easily the best fantasy quarterback through 4 weeks right now. I think right now I would still take Josh Allen and probably Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson. Like rest of season, if I was just like ranking the quarterbacks, I think Jaden Daniels probably comes in like 4th. I don't know how you guys see it, but Josh Allen just has so much upside. Like his ceiling is literally through the roof. Lamar and Jalen Hurts going on a bye week should have AJ Brown, probably Devonta Smith back in week 5. So I think, in week 6. So I think that whole offense will look completely different coming out of the early season bye. But I don't know. Where would you guys put, if you just only quarterbacks, where would you put Jaden Daniels rest of season?
Oof. It's hard. It's hard not to be tempted to keep him at 1, 2. I'm kind of with Lee here because honestly, like the rushing upside was there from the beginning, but I think the maturity as a thrower at the NFL level was something that floored a lot of people. I think you're right, though. I think you have to temper it a little bit because, he hasn't done it long enough. He's only done it for these 4 games. And, unless you're someone that's like, well, Washington's still going to be losing all the time, so he's going to be slinging it all game. He's not going to have any game scripts. Like, the Eagles
defense is going to be bad.
Right. The Eagles get into those low-scoring trench battles, right? Like things like that. I'm definitely not taking him over Josh Allen. I think for sure Josh Allen and probably Lamar for sure with how often that Ravens team is running the ball. Because then if they even pass a little bit more rest of the season, I mean, it's tough to argue with them. But
for the next 6, though, Browns, Ravens, Bears, Steelers for the next 6. Those are good defenses.
Yeah.
And so far he's faced the Giants, bad defense, the Cardinals, probably the second worst defense to the Commanders, and the Bengals, whose defense hasn't looked phenomenal.
Right.
So I don't want to understate like what he's done by any means.
Right.
I just think if I had to choose a quarterback the rest of the season, I don't know that I'd put him as the top of my list quite yet.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think he finishes at number 2 behind Josh Allen. I think Josh Allen is maybe the best fantasy player that you can have.
Yeah.
If Christian McCaffrey's not healthy. So I mean, I think you just look at the way the Ravens' tendencies are. Lamar Jackson, I think, has a lot more potential to take a back seat in games because of game script than Jaden Daniels would. And we've seen happen before where the Ravens just get up big early and then they just run the ball down your throat. Here's a bunch of carries for Justice Hill and Derrick Henry or J.K. Dobbins in the past or whoever. and Lamar Jackson just kind of hangs out. Maybe he puts up 60 rushing yards, gets 150 yards passing. If he's lucky, he got a touchdown in that game, but finishes with 10 points, you know? So I mean I think that has a lot more of an effect for him long term. And just knowing how difficult the Ravens schedule is compared to Washington's long term. Because like you mentioned a couple of defenses there, Cleveland and Pittsburgh. Lamar Jackson plays them twice a year.
Yeah.
So I mean, those are all situational things that I think give Jaden Daniels the edge. I'm really high on him.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Trevor, when you and I were running the show here, it was like I knew you were always the mobile QB guy. That was always
Oh, yeah.
Anthony Richardson truther and all that. But
Just holding the Anthony Richardson MVP, ticket. That is like,
yeah.
I should have burned that a long time ago, apparently.
Welcome to the Anthony Richard for MVP symposium. We're gonna start with this item here. No, it's one of those things where I'm bought in on a mobile QB and usually I'm not.
Yeah.
So I mean, this guy really sticks out for me.
Yeah, he has been phenomenal. Yeah. I definitely do not disagree with that by any means at all. Love it. And he's my biggest win because I continued to draft him anytime I couldn't get Kyler Murray. Baby. So, all right, let's get into a little bit of a draft here. Thank you all for sticking with us here. We're going to draft. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go in order. Dan, I gave you the 101 as the guest picker here. But what we'll do is we'll just go in order. We're not necessarily drafting teams, more just drafting like who we think the next best player is, if that makes sense. So that way I don't have to sit here and talk about my 0 RB crap. We'll just take who is the next best player, and then we'll wrap it around in round 2 and kind of snake it on the way back. If you're here with us, if you're in the chat, hit the like button, subscribe to the Bite Size Sports YouTube network, and then jump into the chat and let us know if you agree, disagree. Who would you take the 101? I think there's probably 3 guys. I'm interested to see where Dan goes. I think there's probably 3 guys that are in the conversation.
Yeah.
But I want to know who you would take if you're in the chat here at 101. And then, Dan, let's hear from you who you would take at the 101 for the rest of the season.
What kind of guy would I be if I didn't take my regular season or quarter season MVP 101? So I got to go Justin Jefferson for my first pick. He's just been awesome. Now I think Neighbors, as good as he's been, right? We talked about that already. Hard not to go with the guy who's currently sitting number 1 or even Nico Collins. But I think Justin Jefferson's ceiling just surpasses them exponentially.
Justin Jefferson, 101.
And
I have no complaints about it.
Anyway.
He was not in my top 3. He wasn't in my top 3. He would be in my top 5 for sure. But he wasn't in my top 3. Josh, was he in your top 3? And then who do you have 102?
Was he in my top 3? I have to pull up my list here. He was just on my top 5. He was in my top 5 still. Yep. Not quite top 3. I'm gonna take the current wide receiver 1. I'm gonna take Malik Neighbors. And I know it feels weird to take a rookie that early, but he is getting so many targets, it's unbelievable. And so I feel like he's matchup proof because of that, and I feel like he's wide receiver 1 now. I don't see him slowing down all season. So, he's got almost 10 more targets than the next highest if I'm looking at my numbers right here. So he's going to be – the Giants are going to have to keep throwing too. I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel good about him.
They will. They're going to keep throwing it to him.
Yeah.
Well, the 3 guys I have at the top are Nico Collins, CeeDee Lamb, and Saquon Barkley. I have Nico Collins at 101 right now, 29% target share. His floor game this year was 4 catches for 86 yards. He's been over 100 yards in 3 of his first 4 games. He is just absolutely balling out. I love what I've seen out of Nico Collins, and it kind of seems like him and Stroud are picking up right where they left off.
Yep.
So give me Nico Collins at the 103.
Nice.
Dan?
Saquon Barkley was going to be the next guy that I took if he made it back to me, I think, from a running back perspective. I'm looking at this in terms of like, you know, who's played consistently well, and then whose ceiling is going to be the highest amongst these players. And I think
Yeah.
there's not a running back out there with Christian McCaffrey being hurt that has a higher ceiling than Saquon.
I think it's not close, right? Like I don't think it's close.
Not at all.
I know Alvin Kamara is the RB1, but he has an outlier week where he had 4 touchdowns or whatever it was. Like a week to week consistency with that huge upside Barkley brings to the table right now. I don't think it's close to the next RB currently.
Not at all. And you know, Eagles running backs, man, there's just something about the way that their offense is just so conducive to them, whether it's passing or running. You know, I was a Miles Sanders proponent, and then I was big on DeAndre Swift, so I feel like I got to keep the trend going with these Eagles running backs. They've never steered me wrong. And we finally get a guy who has big time talent in there, and it's like, duh, this is why this is happening.
He looks really good compared to some of those other guys they used to have in the DeAndre Swifts and Miles Sanders of the world. A little different breed. Josh, you get the 105.
The 105. We have one division's very well represented here. We're going to go CeeDee Lamb here, and the NFC East is continuing to get some love. It's not my favorite division to give love to, but
3 of the first 5 picks.
But I like the volume I'm seeing with my 2 wide receivers. I know we're not building teams right now, but I like the volume getting both those receivers. CeeDee Lamb is just the factor for the Cowboys, and you know they've been a weird team this year so far. So I think that's part of the reason why he hasn't exactly exploded yet. But I think he's going to be a key role in their run throughout the season. I think I can't pass up that talent here at the 105.
At the 106, I think is a toss-up here between St. Brown and Chase for me personally, which is right where they were both drafted also at the beginning of the season. I don't think their value has changed much. I'll give the nod to the team who is going to probably play in more shootouts and definitely play in more dome games because their home stadium is a dome. And Amon-Ra St. Brown with the Lions, 32% target share here. He's had 3 straight weeks over 20 fantasy points. I mean, he is the guy. We talked about Sam Laporta and how he's not really showing up. The touchdowns are all going to the running backs right now, which is a little frustrating if you're a St. Brown manager. But in PPR, I mean, he's going to get there week in and week out, and so I like Amon-Ra St. Brown here at the 6 hole.
It's a good pick.
Yep,
it's a good pick.
I like that pick
this
too.
This is where it gets tough because I want to go with a wide receiver, but my gut is telling me that I should put who I think is the most dynamic player out there, and it's Josh Allen. So I'll break the seal on quarterback and put him out here. Like if we're just drafting on sheer potential for players, regardless of position, then I feel like Josh Allen flips the mark here, and you know, the third run of these picks.
My only knock on Josh Allen is it's been a little bit of like a seesaw approach, like back and forth this year.
Mm-hmm.
I have him in my largest dynasty league that I have, and I'm 2-2. And the 2 games I won, 2 games he went off, the 2 games I lost were just 2 dead weeks. So that's the only, for me, that would be my biggest knock on Allen.
And it's a fair knock for
the
sure.
Ceiling, I mean, and the way he has looked when he has looked on, this Buffalo Bills team has looked unstoppable. When they're on, they weren't on against the Ravens. The Ravens are a very good defensive team. Don't let them fool you, right? So if we're thinking rest of season, I don't think this seesaw approach continues. I think he just starts smashing week in and week out.
And I think, you know, quarterbacks are going to have 1 or 2 bad games like every top 5, top 3 quarterbacks. They're going to have one or
Yeah.
two stinkers in a season. Josh Allen's first, bust type of game, it was game script. I mean, they were up 5 possessions with
Yeah.
the Jaguars, right? And there was just no chance of them getting back into that game. So why the hell would you even run the risk of
Yep.
hurting him, So that's too bad, because you're hoping that if it gets to that point in the game, it's Josh Allen scoring the touchdowns. But it was, James Cook and the defense really taking the bulk of that.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And then he doesn't even play the fourth quarter against the Ravens, essentially. So
Right.
Pulled
Right.
him.
that was tough break. Josh, 108.
108. I'm finally doing that thing, Trevor, I talked about, where I was going to take 3 receivers to start the draft. So I'm going to take Jamar Chase here. One of our earlier episodes before our draft, we did a mock, and I was talking about how I was going to take 3 receivers, and then of course I took a running back, my first overall pick. So I couldn't even stick to the plan I made that same night. So tonight we stick to it. I get Jamar Chase. I think the Bengals are kind of starting to get their feet under them. Chase gets the volume plus the big playability. I like him here at the back end of the first round. So I think there's a lot of upside. Plus, he's already wide receiver 10. He's not like he's had a bad year so far. So I'm thinking rest of the season I feel pretty good about the Bengals hopefully competing. I mean, who knows? Their defense is very weirdly not very good. So
No, I think the offense will continue to roll there.
Yep.
Jamar Chase will be. I mean, we kind of worried a little bit after the slow start, but
right.
It's hard to be worried about a guy like Jamar Chase. 9th overall here for me is where running backs will start to kind of come into play a little bit more often. I mean, there's a lot of running backs I like over the next couple picks, but I'm going to start with a guy that I've actually never drafted, I don't think. And if this was a real draft and a real fantasy team, there's no way I'm drafting him. But I'm taking the big dog, Derrick Henry. It's really, really hard to argue about 5 touchdowns in the first 4 games. He's got a super high floor right now in Baltimore, and he's already shown off his 30-point ceiling twice this year.
Yep.
Yes,
so, I mean, the big dog's been eating, and he's been eating a lot.
He's averaging 6 yards a carry, Trevor. So you'll be happy with that.
Yeah. Again, like if we're actually drafting to play a team the rest of the year, probably going to be hard for me to actually make that click. But if I'm just looking at who the best players are rest of season, what we've seen so far, man, Derrick Henry has absolutely been eating.
Man, you took the pick right out from under me. Derrick Henry is my guy. I drafted Derrick Henry. I know you and I had some back and forth. Previously about.
I've always been wrong. I've been wrong about Derrick Henry for 10 years, man. And yet here he is still freaking dominating.
He's approaching 30. He's gonna fall off. Nah, he just finds a new way to reinvent the wheel.
outrunning guys way younger than him somehow. Like,
I mean, dude, he had 21 miles per hour top speed. Like, whatever.
And now he's in the system that you have to worry about other things too. You got to worry about Lamar running and
right.
Like
it's not one-dimensional, actually.
Yeah. They don't just turn and hand it to him 35 times a game.
Right. Insane. Well, for my pick, since I got swiped, I guess I'll pivot back to wide receiver. And I'm going to take a guy who has had 2 really, really big games. And I think the only reason he had 2 slow games is because his quarterback was out, and it's Jaden Reed for the Green Bay Packers.
Oh, yeah. Oof. I like that a lot.
He has been awesome, man. And this is like my redemption for being anti-Packers receivers. I feel like anytime a Packers receiver the last couple of years not named, whoa. Not
Sorry,
named,
I had to fix my conditional formatting.
Anytime a Packers receiver not named Devontae Adams is highly touted coming into a fantasy draft, they have disappointed me left and right. Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson. I mean, those guys, Alan Lazard, he was supposed to be the guy. I mean, there were so many times where, you take the bait on these guys and it just doesn't pan out. And I was like, you know what? I'm out. Not going to buy into the Jaden Reed hype, and he's been everything and more.
Yeah.
That was hyped up, and with Jordan Love coming back, he is going to have a great rest of the season, and I only wish I was going to be a part of the ride for him. So
Yeah, I think the window's closed, right? Like you had 2 weeks to get him. You had
Yep.
2 weeks to try to make that trade, and that window is closed at this point. Jaden
I
Reed.
messed up AA Ron.
Yeah, definitely dominant right there with Jordan Love back. Josh, the 11th pick. Who you got?
Boy. I'm very tempted to go running back here. But again, we're not drafting to play these teams. So I'm looking at a guy who is kind of at least flying under my radar to an extent. I'm going to go with Chris Godwin here, which feels way too early, feels way weird to me. But
Before
when we look
Mike
at
Evans, like it's weird.
right, because he's got 8 targets, 9 targets, 9 targets. The Bucks are better than I thought they'd be, and his is the more consistent play type, I feel like. And if Baker's rolling, I think Chris Godwin's going to be a really high floor type of guy rest of the season. And he's wide receiver 5 right now. So he's averaging over 19 points a game. So I don't see a complete drop off there. I'm still not fully on the Bucks bandwagon, but it's hard. If I was drafting a real team right now, I'd be going running back probably at this point. But I'm looking at all that volume, and it's hard to ignore.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna
Running out of the slot now. This new offense in Tampa Bay has really been highlighting Chris Godwin out of the slot. Lee says he would take Ken Walker and Jaden Reed before Derrick Henry. Honestly, I think if you're going to tell me that I'm going to get 12 more games of a healthy Kenneth Walker versus a 12 more games of a healthy Derrick Henry, I think I could probably be persuaded for Ken Walker. But Ken Walker has to deal with Zach Charbonnet. Josh said it earlier. Charbonnet's got 10 PPR points per game already, even with Ken Walker in there. So I just don't think he's going to have the full-time volume that Henry's going to have. And I get it. Justice Hill's also been great in Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all Henry. Like Justice Hill is catching passes. He's not being handed the ball like Charbonnet would be in Seattle. So I think I'd still lean Henry there. And you don't have to ask me twice to take a wide receiver over running back. So no argument with Reed over Henry. I am here at the turn, and there are so many guys I want to talk about, honestly, at this position. I think I'm going to go. I think I'm going to just go. Well, I know Marvin Harrison is going to be one of them. This is where you drafted him at the beginning of the year. He was being taken at the turn. He had a slow start in week 1, and then he absolutely exploded in week 2, and he has consistently given you double-digit outputs ever since then. Even when last week, he still was fine. I like his floor here, and I think this offense will continue to gel and get better and better as we go. And then I have a running back I like here, but I'm not going to take him. I'm going to actually take A.J. Brown, because I think that we kind of forgot. If we're thinking rest of season here, A.J. Brown should be healthy coming out of this bye week.
Yep.
And A.J. Brown was drafted in the first round. He has these high expectations, but he's just been hurt. I can't fault the guy because he's been injured. So thinking rest of season, I think you have 1 week to get A.J. Brown, and that's this week. Because once this week's over and people can play A.J. Brown next week, you're not going to be able to trade for him. But I do think there are probably teams out there, maybe they're 1-3, maybe they're 0-4. They need to get a win this week. They're desperate for a win this week, and they got A.J. Brown on a bye week. They can't play him still. This would be a week that I would be targeting A.J. Brown and trying to pull off that trade. If I'm 4-0 and I can go and send 2 guys away to the 0-4 team with A.J. Brown on it, that's what I want to do this week, because it's going to make my starting lineup better the rest of the season. Oh, and by the way, you're through the bye week. You have no more bye weeks that have to deal with A.J. Brown moving forward. So I love AJ Brown right now, and it's somebody I would be targeting heavily to try and get for the rest of the season, because I do think his fantasy manager probably is having a rough year without him as the first round pick.
I love that pick. I mean, if you're going to be injured, it might as well be during a bye week.
That's
There,
right.
Yeah.
when you can ramp back up. That's a solid pick, AJ Brown.
For sure. All
Josh?
right, I am up with my first pick of the second round. You guys think it's too early for Sam Laporta, or
Your bust of the year?
yeah? No, I'm gonna go with. I kind of like Dan's strategy of jumping on one of those high level quarterbacks. I'm gonna take Lamar. I'm gonna take Lamar here. In the second round, he's averaging almost 24 fantasy points a game, and that's with the floor of not a ton of passing. You know, Derrick Henry's carrying a lot of the rushing load as well, but Lamar's doing his thing. And I think as they get into the stretch run of competing for playoff seeding and positioning, I think he's going to have to do a little bit more. Teams might start to try to fill the box a little bit harder on Henry. Not that they'll be able to stop him, but I don't know. I can theorize that if I want. And so I'm going to take the difference maker here with Lamar in the second round. So I think he's got a good stable floor for the rest of the season. So
That's solid. That's a solid pick. Obviously, team QB over here as well. That. I mean, dynamic is all get out.
yeah.
Man, I mean, for mine, I'm a little bit torn between a couple of people. But I'm gonna go off of I'm taking a guy who's been trending upward over the last couple weeks, and even though their offense and team as a whole has not performed well, I think this guy is going to keep putting up numbers, and it's Brian Thomas, the wide receiver for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Back-to-back weeks with 9 targets from Trevor Lawrence. I think they're finally starting to work him into the offense, and he just exploded last week, and he had a really solid week 1 as well, and really hasn't had a terrible game, right? He just had the one down game against the Bills, which, I mean, that entire offense had a down game against the Bills. So, I think Brian Thomas is really going to turn into one of those top 3, premier rookie receivers. And when you're in company with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors, I think you're pretty solid. So I think Brian Thomas is going to be my pick for sure here.
Yeah, I think he's fought against the only going to be a deep threat issue. Like he started the year off with one big play that kind of helped his early week 1 score, but he's definitely proven that he's a mature pass catcher. He's going to be all over the field, and he's going to be the lead target getter in Jacksonville. So approaching must-start category probably.
3 rookie wide receivers in the top 15. That's top 13 skill positions if we want to take the quarterbacks out of that. So that's pretty good. They're all really, really good. It's a great rookie class through the first 4 weeks so far. And and I agree. I went back and forth on Brian Thomas. Like, should I keep him on my top 24 or not? He ended up not getting onto my list. But I think a lot of that is because I think that the running backs, I mean, I've talked about the 0 RB stuff at the top of the show. Like, I think the running backs are really starting to separate themselves from like, if you don't have the guy, you're really struggling at the running back position right now. And in a PPR league, Alvin Kamara, 17 catches through the first 4 weeks. He's giving you an additional 4 points just off catches per week. Doesn't even include the yardage he's getting on those catches, just being peppered over and over again. I really like Alvin Kamara, and he's the guy I kind of tangoed with in the Harrison and AJ Brown area. So if you guys aren't going to take him, I'll take him here.
He was who I was thinking about taking if I didn't go Brian Thomas.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's just a guy that I think he's RB1 on the season right now, and he had his phenomenal 1 big week. That's an outlier, right? Like in 4 week sample size, it's really hard to be like, oh, he's an RB1. You have to take him early. But if I can get him now in the second round, I like him a lot there. Again, I think he's just going to continue to catch passes in this offense, and New Orleans is in ball games, and they didn't win last week, and they're not going to win this week. But other than those 2 weeks, they've been winning, potentially winning ball games. So give me some Alvin Kamara here.
Yeah, I think that's a smart pick there. I was trying to debate how much he was going to fall because I knew at RB1 Kamara wasn't going to be my first running back off the board, but it's kind of hard to pass him off for too long because he has that low floor of all those catches like you mentioned. So I hear you there. I am up here again in the second round, and I am going to go kind of toying with a couple guys here. I'm going to ignore last week, and I'm going to take Breece Hall. I'm going to stay in the running back room and take a running back that was going in the first round a few months ago. He's a talent. I know Braylon Allen burst onto the scene, and people are worried he's going to eat into the volume. But I think Breece Hall is still the lead back there. They got their Denver game out of the way where they couldn't do anything, and they lost 10-9. And I think that they're going to get back at it. And I'm a little scared about Breece Hall this week in London against my Vikes, so we'll have to see how that goes. But he's a proven fantasy running back, and again, to get him middle of the second round here, I feel pretty good at the value. So
now you got to be happy with that. Breece Hall, I'm surprised you didn't go with the guy I'm about to pick.
I think I know who you're going to pick.
I'm taking Kyren Williams here.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I think with the way the Rams offense is going to be moving forward, nursing Cup back from the injury, nursing Puka Nacua back from this injury, as long as Kyren Williams stays healthy, the offense is going to keep running through him, and he's been a touchdown machine. Through the first 4 weeks, dude. Like 6 touchdowns on the ground, I think, and then maybe we won another one through the air. Is that right? Yeah, look at it again, just so I can...
Literally, the note I had is Kyren Williams - touchdown machine. Exactly
touchdown
what you
machine.
just said.
Like he's just a touchdown factory. So I am all aboard the Kyren Williams train.
Nice.
Yeah, I like Kyren. He's gonna get all the work in LA. I'm gonna go back to the the wide receiver room here. Thinking rest of the season, it's been a tough 3 weeks without his quarterback, but can we really push Tyreek Hill down the board too far? I mean, he is still Tyreek Hill. He still has a huge ceiling. And from what it sounds like, Tua is going to be back over the next 2 to 4 weeks. So I think that helps, obviously. And if he's going to be back and healthy, I think I'm willing to take a shot on Tyreek Hill rest of the season.
Yeah, at some point.
PTSD from that.
Also, I watched that game, and Huntley is throwing the deep ball to him still. He just missed him. I mean,
he missed.
Give me another week or two of Huntley at quarterback. I think they can connect on these.
I think it was 3 different deep balls. 2 were in the end zone in particular that he missed him by, a mile.
Yeah.
A mile.
But the one was not so bad. Middle of the field. I think Tyreek was probably like on the 30. He would have walked in, but he was probably like on the 30 running his route, overthrowing by, I don't know, 2 or 3 yards. I mean, it's not an easy throw, obviously.
Can I get your opinion on a trade I made?
Yeah.
We're in the middle here. We just I drafted Tyreek Hill in a league, and I decided to trade him. So I got an offer that I just could not refuse. The players I sent were Tyreek Hill, James Cook, and Zach Moss. Okay, I sent off Tyreek Hill, James Cook, Zach Moss. This is in a vacuum, right? Obviously, trades grading him in a vacuum tough.
Yep.
Who I got in return is Brian Thomas, CeeDee Lamb, and Kenneth Walker.
Wow. See, when you said the guys that you had sent away, you said Joe Mixon was one of them.
I sent Zach
Moss. Zach Moss. Okay,
James
Zach
Cook
Moss.
and Tyreek Hill.
I was thinking Cincinnati, but I couldn't remember it.
Yeah.
When you had said James Cook, I was really turned off. I'm like, I'm not gonna like this trade at all. Because I'm pretty high on James Cook. But yeah, I mean, we just drafted CeeDee Lamb, 5th overall here.
Yep.
Ken Walker probably will get picked over the next couple picks. I actually don't mind that at all. I think Ken Walker and James Cook probably are the most equal of all of those. If you just look 3 versus 3, those two are probably going to be equal.
Yep.
Both of them are going to give you probably RB6 to RB10 at the end of the season.
Yep.
With the potential to be top 5. Tyreek Hill doesn't have the potential to be a top 5 week in and week out anymore, but CeeDee Lamb does.
Yep.
And Brian Thomas gives you the wide receiver versus the running back, Zach Moss. Zach Moss has not looked great. Chase Brown looks faster and more elite than Zach Moss. Zach Moss is still going to get his run, but no, I like that. I like that a lot. I think when you said James Cook, I was a little bit worried, but when you're going to get Kenneth Walker back,
What did you do, Dan? What did you do?
Yeah, but when you get Kenneth Walker back, that's very even. And then CeeDee Lamb is, to me, far and ahead more than Tyreek Hill at this point in the season.
Yeah, I'm with you too. I think that's a good trade. I think for that alone, like moving off of Tyreek and not having to talk about all of the stress that we mentioned earlier of, is this the week they're finally going to connect? He's going to be back to Tyreek Hill. Now you have all of that gone, and you have insta starts with CeeDee Lamb, probably Brian Thomas and Ken Walker there. So I think
Did you do this while Walker was hurt?
Walker was set to return this week. This happened just before this week. And of course, in my matchup, I get about 90 combined points between Brian Thomas, Kenneth Walker, and CeeDee Lamb.
And maybe they're like looking at I haven't used him last 2 weeks, and now he faces the Lions. I can't start him this week, and I don't know that I'm just like now trying to figure out why the other person would want to make that trade, because they're not necessarily getting. It's not like you're getting like a great running back on top, like you're giving her a CeeDee Lamb because you're getting this phenomenal running back. You are getting James Cook back, but you're not getting, like, Zach Moss is not a phenomenal running back. I would have given up more. I would have given up like Brian Robinson in that same trade instead of Zach Moss and still made the trade.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah. I love that. That's a good trade.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Congrats, Dan.
I was a happy guy. That's the only trade I've made so far this year. So
Way to take somebody to the woodshed last week on the trade market. All right, let's finish up this draft here, Josh.
Let's do it. So I'm going to stay running back, but not take one of the two we mentioned, even though I would gladly take either of them right here. I'm going to go a little bit more upside for an offense that I think is going to explode soon. I'm going to take Jahmyr Gibbs here before we see Cook and Walker come off. Those were tempting picks as well, but Jahmyr Gibbs is off to a really good start this season. And I just think that this offense is going to get better and better throughout the year. And I think his targets will go up, his catches will go up, and he's already getting at least 10 plus carries a game. So Montgomery is always going to be there and vulture some of his touchdowns. We know that. But that's already happening now, and he's still succeeding. So you worry about all the weapons to go around in Detroit, but I think their offense is going to be good enough. And so if this is his floor, I'm getting in now here on Jahmyr Gibbs. So
yeah, as a guy who took Gibbs and ADP at the turn, I love seeing that it's not an auto swap when they get inside the 5.
Right.
Like Gibbs, if he's on the field, he stays on the field. And I love that. And both of these guys can get there. Both these running backs can get there. And so, as we saw just this past week, but yeah, I was like the biggest concern for me for Gibbs is that they get inside the 5 and they just automatically put David Montgomery in. They're not doing that. And that's really nice as a Gibbs manager.
Yeah. That's what deterred me from Gibbs in the draft, was thinking David Montgomery is going to be the auto draw inside the 5.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And that has not been the case. Luckily, that's,
for
kicking
sure.
myself. I've taken it in a couple of scenarios for sure. So I have 2 picks left. I don't know that this guy is going to make it to me at this last pick. So I think I want to pull the trigger now on Jordan Mason.
Oh, he was not going to make it.
Yeah.
He was not going to make it because I wanted to talk about him too.
I have not seen even a sliver of good news about Christian McCaffrey. Not one hint, not one positive note, nothing from Kyle Shanahan. The guy's in Germany, for God's sakes, getting work done on his legs. Okay? He if he comes back, will he even be 100%? Is the question. And if he comes back, will it be during the fantasy football season? Or will they just bring him back for a playoff run? Jordan Mason has been a top 5 fantasy back since he surprisingly took the starting role, that fateful primetime game, Monday night game, and he really hasn't looked back. While he doesn't get a lot of play in the passing game, I'd like a little more of that from him, or else maybe I would have taken him sooner if he did. But I mean, the guy on the ground has averaged over 5 yards a carry in all but one game. And that was against a tough, Rams defense. So a game that they were winning the majority of the time too, up until that last couple series. So I got to go Jordan Mason here. I mean, I think the guy still will finish in the top 10 as a fantasy running back, maybe top 6.
Yeah, I mean, insert starting running back here for the 49ers, to be honest. And then on top of that, Jordan Mason has looked really good. So you have you have a big win there for sure.
Before I get to my pick, I just want to debunk this real quick. Lee, David Montgomery, if this is what we all expected. We all expected David Montgomery to get all the red zone carries. But in fact, through the first 4 weeks, inside the 20-yard line, David Montgomery, 13 carries, 44 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 catch. Jahmyr Gibbs, 14 carries, 32 yards, 3 touchdowns, 4 catches. It is whoever is on the field stays on the field and gets the run. So that I would just caution that. Like it's what we feel, but if you're watching the games or looking at the stats, it's actually very, very even and very split. All right. I am going to go Jonathan Taylor and stick with the running backs here. I would take Taylor a lot higher than this if he did not have a high ankle sprain right now. Mm-hmm. So that kind of worries me, and that makes me lower him quite a bit. I think if he comes out the last week fully healthy and there's no, even worry that he's going to miss a week, maybe 2, he's probably closer to the turn for me. RB6 on the season. He has looked really good. While Anthony Richardson has struggled, Jonathan Taylor has not here through the first 4 weeks. So got a good floor, and he's got that 30-point upside as always. So give me Jonathan Taylor at pick number, what are we at? 21 with 22 with 2 picks to go.
Nice. Yeah, the Colts have been running pretty well. Anthony Richardson's completion percentage notwithstanding. So Jonathan Taylor, if he comes back healthy, should be in good shape there.
I don't think it's going to be long term, right? Even if he misses, I think it's just a week or 2.
Right. I don't think it's an IR stint either. So nice. All right. Well, if my last pick here, I have to go with one of my MVPs. So I'm going to take that Ken Walker guy that we've been mentioning a bunch tonight. And then find out how I can get the same team somewhere in real life, because I'm feeling really good about my squad right now. But yeah, Ken Walker, just the volume. We talked about Charbonnet eats into it a little bit, and they're, and he's also gets that 10+ points per PPR points per game. But Ken Walker's still a lead back there, so the health is a little bit of a concern. So I didn't consider him earlier, because he's seemingly always has injuries every year, not just. Health is a concern for every player, but he's one of those guys that you have to be a little bit more concerned with, because he's got a history of that a little bit more than others. So, but at the time being, coming off a 33-point performance on Monday night, welcome to the squad, Ken.
Yeah, had to go before the end of this thing.
Yeah.
No tight ends. I think we're going to end this thing with 0 tight ends in the top 24.
I mean, how can we pick a tight end in the first 2 rounds? We weren't taking tight ends in the first 2 rounds of the regular drafts.
That's true.
And now the tight ends have come out and stunk.
Yeah. It's been bad. It's been bad. I think that's just worth noting just how bad they've been. Um, no
Yeah.
consistency. The passing numbers are down. Maybe that's, the cover two. That's probably why these running
Yeah.
backs are popping off the way they are. Everyone knows you run too high, you can just get ran on. So, yeah, I mean, for me, ooh, it's like there's a couple players that you want to make sure they show up on this list, but then it's also like, I don't know, like I kind of want to say Devon Achane because he's been kind of defying things over there in Miami. I kind of want to say James Cook because obviously he's still balling out there in Buffalo. David Montgomery's getting plenty of carries. But I want to bring up another wide receiver here that, gosh, this is so tough. I think I got to give it to Stephon Diggs. I'm going to put Stephon Diggs right here. He has been a solid target for CJ Stroud in just about every scenario. I think the question was, is Diggs going to get the volume that he's had previously? And while it's just a tick below that, Nico Collins is clearly the number one there. It's clear that Stephon Diggs is the number two, and this offense is pass happy enough that he's still making his numbers every single time. He's been one of the more consistent. He's just a shade outside of the top 10 for receivers, and he does not look like he's lost a step, in my opinion.
Yeah.
He's just behind Nico Collins, who's the favorite target and has more chemistry with with CJ Stroud, and they're doing creative things with him.
Yep.
Right? He's almost taken on that Debo Samuel gadget player kind of role, but in Houston, and I like that. I like that they're putting in rounds on him. I like that they're letting him throw some touchdown passes. So I'm going Stephon Diggs.
I did not have Diggs in my top 24, but I don't mind it. I mean, you actually made a good point. He has been pretty consistent this year. I think I just need to come around on him. Tank Dell still gives me a little bit of worry for Diggs. I do think if he's healthy and they're utilizing Tank Dell the way they want to, it might limit Diggs, but it hasn't limited yet. So that's more like a theory than anything because we haven't seen it on the field. You mentioned 3 running backs, Montgomery, Cook, and Achane. I have all of them in my top 24. 2 wide receivers that weren't mentioned. Chris Olave.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not worried about Chris Olave.
No.
He had a bad first week, but he's been completely fine the last 2 weeks.
Yep.
The last 3 weeks, really, but he hasn't shown the 30-point ceiling. I think that kind of probably keeps him off this list, whereas some of these other guys absolutely have. And then DK Metcalf.
Touchdowns.
Yeah, he does have the touchdowns, and that's going to hurt him a little bit. But DK Metcalf currently sitting in the top 10 of wide receiver.
He might be
but somehow he doesn't.
10.
What's that?
He might be the quietest wide receiver in the top 10 right now.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. A tough first week. He has a tough first week, but he's been over 15 PPR points the last 3 weeks. He does show the 30-point upside with a 28-point, nearly 29-point week 2. The Seattle offense in general is probably the quietest good offense. Everybody wants to talk about Tampa Bay and New Orleans, right? And how great those 2 offenses have looked. This Seattle offense has looked phenomenal.
Right.
And we just kind of continue to overlook it. Ken Walker going at 23 and DK Metcalf not even being on the list. So those are just 2 guys I wanted to shout out here as we end this list. Josh, any guys that you think we may have missed or could have at least had an argument to be on the list that we didn't mention?
No, I don't think so. You mentioned a couple of guys that are kind of right on the fringes for me. It's funny, I didn't even shout out my own guy, Aaron Jones here. He maybe could have been in consideration based on what he's done so far this year. But he's also a guy that, I worry about him making it through the whole season. Like last year he battled injury when he was with the Packers still, and I still would, if I'm as a Vikings fan, I'd prefer if we balanced it out and gave Chandler more just to keep Aaron Jones fresh for the stretch run now that we're going to be competing for a playoff spot. But he would one that I would consider giving a shout to. And then you guys both mentioned Devon Achane. And believe me, if Devon Achane had a quarterback or if Tua was still healthy, Devon Achane would have gone in this top 24 easily.
Totally
So yeah, I think you could still justify it because right now he's getting the volume, but we don't know if Mostert comes back and takes some of that away regardless. And then if their offense is still crappy, like it's going to be tough for any Miami starters. But no, I think you mentioned all the ones that I would consider in that category of just missing out. So
go ahead, Dan.
Really, the only other guy I would touch on too is Bijan Robinson because he's getting plenty of the volume. He's just not really getting the scores either. And Tyler Algier's kind of popped in on him a little bit, but I think that could continue to evolve and change because while he's been kind of missing out on the touchdowns, he's been pretty consistent. But that Falcons offense as a whole just has not scored touchdowns. So,
Bijan 70 touches through the first 4 weeks.
Yeah.
That's pretty solid.
It's great volume.
That's 15, 16 touches a game.
Yep.
Yeah.
You love that for him. Just the one touchdown though so far, and that's kind of keeping him down.
Seriously.
Gotta find the end zone. Well, that'll take us to the end here. Appreciate everybody who's been here and watching, and Lee for always jumping in the chat. If you haven't already, go ahead and smash that like button. But Dan, before we go first, thanks for jumping on. Appreciate it.
Love
it. I'll hit you up again in 2 weeks when Josh can't be here. Maybe I can get you back on. You and I can kind of hang out.
It's my home away from home. Right.
That's right. That's right. Come on back. But whether you're here or you're not here, tell the people where you are twice a week, right?
Yes, sir.
Am I getting that right? I mean, I'm trying to listen as much as possible. One, because I love the Chiefs and because I love you, but I think it's been coming out twice a week. So tell the people about the Fastest 40.
Yeah, during the season, we're dropping 2 a week. We try to do it in the off season too for the big stuff, draft, free agency, that kind of thing. But we're 2 times a week. We're dropping on Spotify. It's the Fastest 40 in partnership with Odyssey Sports. So dropping on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and the YouTube Odyssey Sports YouTube page as well. Typically, we're doing a recap of every Chiefs game, dropping on Monday or Tuesday, and then that Red Friday episode will give you the preview for the game that week, and assuming we don't play on a Thursday night. So, you can catch us there anytime. I got my handle here on the video at Dan_TF40, and then the socials at the Fastest_40 on X and IG. Trevor, it was a pleasure to get back on ADP. It felt good to get some fantasy talk out there.
Heck
Thank
yeah,
you for
man.
having me, and Josh, I appreciate you as well.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Appreciate you coming on.
Josh, tell the people about Mike on the Vikes and all the things you're doing.
Yeah, Mike on the Vikes that's where I do Vikings recaps. It's just me kind of rambling things I noticed during the game, just as an outlet to talk about Vikes, I guess. And then, like Trevor mentioned earlier, get everyone over here on Bite Size Sports, subscribe, and come join us on ADP, Necessary Roughness on Tuesday nights. A lot of good football convo, and then Kevin and James doing the Supersize Sports, things like that. We got a lot of fun stuff going on. So get in touch, get involved, and we're still in the throes of football season for a few more months. So lots of fun to be had.
Absolutely. And the way I hear it, we got the 2 best teams in the NFL, and we got 2 great hosts right here that are talking about the 2 best teams in the NFL. So there's plenty of room on these bandwagons. Hit up the Fastest 40, hit up, Josh's Vikes on the mic, and just listen to people talk about really good football teams, right? Nothing wrong with that.
That's right.
682 subscribers to the Bite Size Sports YouTube channel. We are 18 away. I had it wrong. I think I said 16. We're 18 away from 700. If you would be so kind, it is free to just hit that subscribe button, but it does us a whole lot of good. We appreciate all of you being here tonight. It has been great. Find me on X at @TrevorS_FF. Appreciate you as always for being here each and every week. And until next week, may the winning be in your favor.
I need to know everything, who and the what and the where, I need everything. Trust me, I hear what you're saying, but act like it's new what you're telling me. I'm curious, George, I hop in the Porsche, it's 5 and a horse, I'm ready for war, I'm coming for throats, to turn to a ghost, I need to know everything.